We are here today on the Earth and Cosmic Wisdom series with myself, Mara Elaine. And I have the great pleasure of having a beautiful woman that I'm deeply inspired by, Mary Reynolds, with me today. And Mary she's an Irish but world-renowned reformed landscape designer. And she was one of the youngest actually to receive a gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show back in the day. And she is also a passionate nature activist with, being the founder of the movement We Are the ARK, which we're going to speak to Mary a little bit more about later. She's also the author of a very magical book that is one of my favorites, and it's called The Garden Awakening. There's so much in that book, and we're going to dive into a little bit around Mary's background, but also really speaking to her powerful vision of helping people to connect with the land around them in deeper and more heartfelt ways, really, to become guardians and not gardeners. So that is where we're going to start here with Mary, and I welcome you into this space, Mary. Let me just change this view. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. I feel a deep heart kinship with all that you bring through and embody in your own life. And there's so much I would love to dive into for hours with you. But I think we'll start with a little bit with. There was something that really spoke to me about the story of you as the magical younger one in the field. That I'd love to start with that, because I'm really passionate about working with the elementals and working with nature in ritual spaces and working with the land on that level. So I'd love to start with the younger you and how she interacted with them in those days.
Sure. Okay, well, this is a story that I often tell, so apologies to anyone who's heard it. But it's just a really simple story. I was young. I don't remember what age I was. I just remember my legs were chubby, and when I looked down, and I suppose I was 5, 6, or 7, in around there somewhere. And I grew up on a small farm in the south of Ireland, and there was 6 kids, and I was the youngest, and both my parents worked full time as well as farming. So basically, things were different back then. Just you had a lot of freedom, and you know you came back in the evening and you got fed, but nobody knew where you were, and that was fine. So I remember wandering off one day, around the farm, which I tended to do, and at the top of the farm, in this very small little field. I just remember very distinctly going through the gap, which was about 4 meters wide, for enough for Dad's tractor to get through. And when I got into the little field, I remember feeling something was behind me. And when I turned back, the gap that I literally just walked through was gone. And there was no way out. And so it was just like any other part of the ditches surrounding the field, also the hedges and the trees and the thorny bushes and the wildflowers. They were just there instead of the gap. So I was really scared, obviously, and because I didn't understand what had happened. And I cried a lot, and I ran around the fields shouting, but nobody could hear me. And there was no way out, and I was really confused about the space. I remember not knowing which way was left, which way was right. I was really confused, and I couldn't find my way out. And so, but look, sure, nothing was happening. So eventually I got distracted by the sunshine and the butterflies and the bees, and I sat down in the middle of the meadow, and I calmed down. And then I kind of noticed that I had a feeling that I was being watched. I was kind of surrounded, but I couldn't see anyone. And then I realized it was the plants themselves. They were they were alive, just like I was, and that they all had personalities and spirits, and that they really wanted me to notice them. Really simple thing. And so I didn't really think about that. I got out eventually later that day. One of the neighbors' kids heard me, or looked over the hedge or whatever from the top end of the farm, and she shouted. And when I looked back, the gap was open. And so I went home, but I never told parents about it or anything, because you didn't tell them anything that was kind of normal. And when I was about 18, I remember I told my dad about it, and he was kind of shocked because I told him about it because he had turned the whole farm into a golf driving range at that point. I was really upset about it. And he was giving out about how the fairies used to take stuff on him, and it was a really, he knows it was because he destroyed all the ditches and all the little fields and torn down all the trees, and they used to take things on him, and you know, important stuff, and they would turn up in the middle of the table where you couldn't possibly have missed it. A few hours later, and he used to get really cross about it, and but he kind of understood it as well. But I was telling him about what happened, and he said the same thing had happened to his grandfather in that field, because he remembers hearing about it. So it was known locally as a kind of a fairy field, I guess. It's one of those. And actually,
Yeah.
all those kinds of things, the whole country used to be littered with those kinds of things, but
Yep.
mostly they're gone, which is really sad, because as
Yeah.
the wildness disappears and as the spirit disappears out of the land, all those kind of magical places are kind of disappearing, really sadly.
For sure. And thank you for that. I love that story. I just it evokes such innocence and purity in that connection with the fairy ones. And yeah, I agree with you. I think the spaces are still there. They've just retreated,
Yeah.
slightly. And they're more evident in the wild places, of course, that are kind of left alone, aren't they, really?
Yeah.
And so with your dad, because I can relate to this one, my father was a builder, and I spent a lot of the last 10 or 15 years clearing curses from land spaces where we grew up that were still, affecting our family, really, on an energetic level. And he would have built over sacred places and not known, and so I would have felt a lot of that as a child, that the spirits speaking, being or causing havoc, really, with people. And I know that you speak to that in your book as well, the need for having that sacred relationship with your place of land, or with any land around you. Did your dad, how did you reconcile the land, or did he reconcile the land after changing it to a driving range?
I don't think he did. I made some efforts, all right, and I it it's a funny thing. I kind of asked them all to move to my land, which is part of the farm, and
Right.
so I'm over there now with them. Well, I'm building my home there, and I've been looking after that land for a long time. So I don't know. It's a funny old thing, It's just there's pockets. There's only pockets, but they're just reflections of us. I mean, look around you. I mean, how wild are we, So
Right.
when we're just so domesticated, and we're so disconnected. But it's so easy to restore ourselves. And this COVID thing has given us a chance to slow down and actually do a bit of that.
For sure.
Um, I've started getting into the sea every
Oh,
day, which I hadn't done, and everybody's doing stuff like that, which is good. Growing food, and maybe, well, not everybody, but if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you can. I mean, I'm totally
right.
aware that I'm very lucky. I mean, a lot of people, God, I don't know how people are coping in cities and apartments, and it must be so hard. It must be so
Yeah,
hard on their mental health. Yeah, so
absolutely.
kind of lucky.
I know
Yeah.
it and it takes extra effort, having lived in both environments, city and nature. I feel like the move away from the bigger, I think the way things are going, they're trying to bring us into these bigger communities of cities, and to live in smaller places on top of each other, it's just not natural, right? It is that place where our wildness is stomped out of us, really, isn't it?
Depends on how it's done. If there was actual planning, which there really isn't,
Yeah.
and we could get rid of cars and cities and actually have a shit hot transport system, which allowed people access to wild places, and that the parks weren't horrible dead spaces, that they were actually alive, and that every rooftop was alive and had wild bee sanctuaries or whatever. It would be so easy
Yeah.
if they could just use it. I mean, where does all the money go? You'd wonder. I mean, you just wonder who is in charge, like, but I know it's a very difficult job and it's easy for me to say, but I mean, at some point people are going to have to make positive changes, and
Yeah.
it's a good opportunity to do it now. So hopefully some of them will start happening.
Absolutely. And, we are seeing like those grassroots movements, and definitely I see it even here in the West, in Galway, the younger ones with lots of new market gardeners, finding a little plot of land and just starting
Yeah,
to grow the no dig method and just
perfect.
growing their own veg. And to me, it's so inspiring, that
Oh yeah, that's
the young,
amazing.
it is, it is.
And actually, there's a wonderful book out there by a guy called Rob Hopkins called "From What If to What Is," or "From What Is to What If." And he started the Transition Towns movement. He used to live down in West Cork, and he started there. And then he ended up moving back to, I think it's Totnes in England.
Oh,
But the
yes.
Transition Towns movement is a global phenomenon, and Rob started the whole thing. But he wrote this beautiful book, which is what we were talking about just before we started recording, about imagination and about imagining a different vision for the world. And he has
Right.
done that. And so his book is actually quite important, I think,
Great. Thanks
for
for
all
linking
those
to that.
cities, that we talked about. He has imagined it differently. It's wonderful.
I love that, because once someone has engaged that plan and it's there in the ether somewhere,
Yeah,
it has a chance of actually manifesting
exactly. Yeah,
in the physical.
yeah,
So I love that you speak to that, because it's, I see your gardens, and even though you've shifted the way you're working with gardens, which you might like to speak to as well, what the plans and what you did even at the Chelsea Flower Show, and I know here in Galway, I used to love going to Bridget's garden, which was, I connected with you as well in probably your older gardening days, but still there is still a spirit there of the original intention, which you speak to yourself as well, about the intention being everything with the garden. So where are you? So right now you've transitioned out of that space of really designing in the way that you did. Can you speak to that a little bit, and what you're focused on with the ARK?
sure. Well, I've been it's kind of been a general, um, it's been a, it's been a slow transition, really.
Yeah,
I mean, I've
yeah,
kind of gone through different phases, and I kind of initially, um, somebody made a movie about part of my life, and
that's right.
um, and I kind of, at the time, I kind of thought, well, I better write a book to go along with it, to try and build a house for me and my kids, because I'm
Yeah,
on my own with them and always have been, and I'm always trying to figure out how to do these things, and I'm not very good at that stuff. But I started writing a book about the real story of the movie kind of thing, but that was kind of boring because I talked about it so much to the screenplay writer.
right.
So I started writing about my work, and very quickly I wrote myself out of a job, because I realized that even I have to just plug this in. I just realized
Yeah,
what to do. I realized that even though I'd been designing within the shapes and patterns of nature, so I wasn't blocking the flow of universal energy, because I
yeah.
was staying within those shapes and patterns. So when you stepped into these spaces, they were flowing, the space, and the intentions were good, but the land itself didn't want to stay as I had planned it. It
Hmm.
had its own intentions, and I had ignored them completely. So I was still controlling what way the land itself stayed with my vision of it. And then I realized, oh God, that was a disaster. What was I thinking? And then so I came up with that book that you showed them earlier, and
Yeah,
I started writing about, okay, what does the land itself want to become? And then designing within shapes, the natural shapes and patterns within that concept, and
right.
growing your own food, because we really need to step out of the industrial farming and fishing systems, which are killing everything. And yeah, so that was what that was all about. But then I was sitting at my desk one day looking down over my garden, and a fox ran past, and just after the fox, a couple of hares. And then a little while later, because I was watching and I looked up again, and it was a hedgehog. I remember more than one hedgehog, but in retrospect, I think I might have exaggerated in my head. I was getting upset at that point. And anyway, it was the middle of winter, and they should have been asleep. It was not, hedgehogs are nocturnal. And so it was like Noah's Ark, all these creatures coming from somewhere. So I got up and I went to the end of my lane, and I live in a country lane, and it's quiet. And across the lane, there's this beautiful thicket of a field which was impenetrable. It was full of hawthorn and gorse and brambles and wildflowers, and nobody could get into it. It was about an acre, and somebody had got a planning permission to build a house at the top of the field, and they'd gone in with a digger and they'd done what everybody does, and they'd cleared it out to make a garden. And I just stood there absolutely horrified, because I'd done the same thing myself so many times, and I realized that that was the end of that. And I just thought, God, I have to do something. So I went back inside, and I set up this thing with my friends' help. I liked the idea of calling it "We Are the ARK," acts of restorative kindness to the earth, and asking people to give at least half of their gardens, if they can, or as much if they can spare, back to nature, because we have to learn how to share this. There's nowhere for them left to go. We're just taking everything, and if we don't look after nature's multiple creatures that sustain us, give us food, give us water, give us life, we're gone. And actually our jobs are to look after all of them. And if that's it, there's no other reason for us to be here other than to be really, really, well, we all have our own individual reasons for being here, so that's not very fair, but as a basic kind of universal reason, we have to be the caretakers of this place. Because if you look at an ecosystem in terms of circle, every single creature that lives here has a part to play in that ecosystem. Like, without certain creatures, you won't have others. And it's like a web, and each thread that you're pulling out of the web causes the web to get less and less strong. And eventually the web will collapse. And we're looking at about 10 years before that happens if we don't stop. And so all of us that know this have decided, if we have enough land under our care, any land under our care, we've decided to stop. So and I know this is hard for the world of gardening, but I'm kind of saying, look, lads, the history of gardening, and I did it in college, like the history of landscape design is quite interesting, and there was reasons for it. And it made sense, and it reflected society and culture all the way through. And now we're here where actually everything needs to change, and we need to give our gardens back. We need to become the caretakers again. And even though rewilding on to a point where we can start reintroducing species and actually have a working ecosystem, you need at least 1,000 acres to do that. But even in a tiny window box full of local weed seeds to support creatures is a really good benefit, because people don't understand that the native plants are actually the foundation stone for everything. And if we keep filling our spaces full of pretty plants that have no relationship to all the other creatures that have evolved within the local food web, then what are we doing? Like it's once you come over to my side of the fence, you kind of look at gardens as just lost opportunities. And you think, oh my God, that could be supporting so many creatures, and instead it's just this blank creative vision that's so selfish. Now, I don't think people are being selfish on purpose, because I did it for years, and I was trying really hard.
Right. Yeah.
So I just think once you stop and think about it and change, you can't go back, because once you see it, you go, oh God, yeah, what was I doing? Anyway, so
I hear you, I think it does speak to the individual, where they're at in their own consciousness and their own inner wildness, right? That how far the disconnect is and how deep that is within is reflect it, right, instantly. And even you bringing in the gardens that you worked with were so magical for the time,
Mm.
right? And for you, that it was a natural extension for you, but there was deeper and further for you, as I feel like a messenger for the elemental world, really. That you're here with a voice for that, and of course you have to go beyond. You can't go back.
No.
And I think it's stepping people into those spaces in themselves where they actually, the veil drops and they're able to see the creatures, because a lot of people are not even able to have that awareness,
Yeah.
of the plant as a living thing, and
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like what you speak to as well in your book, and the magical interactions between the plant devas, or the elementals, and us, it's so rich. And that's where we could be opening people in order for them to be able to work in a new way with the land on those levels. And so I speak to your book again, because I want to point out to people that you've really developed like a roadmap.
Yeah.
From like, let's start with on the consciousness level of ourselves, and work with ritual and magic. When did you write this, Mary? Was it?
I wrote that when my kids were small and they were asleep at night. I
Of
suppose
course.
that was it came out in 2016, so I guess it was a few years coming up to that. Yeah.
Right.
And I wrote it then, and I mean, yeah, I do talk about how people can form a relationship with the land, and I suppose I've kind of come to a point now where I feel panicked almost on it, and so I talk about just the very basic stuff about just restoring the health of each patch, whether it's a window box, or we have 1,500 acre ranches in America. We have window boxes in Norway. It's a global movement, and people are really jumping on board, and they might only start with a little bit, but very, very quickly, once they do that, they get sucked in. And and so there's all that other stuff that I talk about in the book about an energetically creating relationship with your land by beating the boundaries, or by listening to what kind of energetic or emotional, spiritual healing the land itself needs. Is just a reflection of you, because you found that land, or it found you, whichever way it works, and you're just a reflection of it. So I mean, if you look around on a wide scale, all of us are reflecting the health of the earth, and we're pouring all these chemicals onto the earth, and of course they're in our bodies, because what we do to the earth we do to ourselves, and it's always been the case. And our ancestors know that, and indigenous people that still live outside this crazy system, they know that. They know that. And see, people don't want to go back to living like that, but we have to find some kind of a harmonious compromise. And I think it's very simple. I think we need to live local walkable communities where we grow our own food, or support local regenerative farming and producers, and we just make a rich, deep life for ourselves, which isn't hectic and involves flying to meetings on the other sides of the world or some rubbish like that. This very simple life is actually very, very good for us. But it'd be great to kind of step towards it rather than to do it through crisis.
Yes, which is where we're at.
That's what we're all trying to do, is all of us banging on about this stuff. It's like, if you don't do this, lads, we are going to be forced into it, and that won't be fun. And society, as the earth breaks down, we all break down. And so we gotta build it up again. So the ARK network is like I guess it's like a network of hope. I kind of feel like if we, people talk about how one person cannot have enough of an effect, but one person can change the world, right? And if one patch of this earth gets healed, it'll have a ripple effect on you and your family, because it just will. because once your consciousness is shifted by your kindness, it's a simple thing, and then your parent, your kids or your brothers and sisters, parents, or whoever you have interested in what you're doing, it'll open up their hearts to what they could do. And maybe they won't do it, but they'll at least be aware of it, of what is wrong, whereas they may not have been before. And then if we can create a patchwork quilt of all these patches that we can wrap around the whole world and create some level of hope. Because people who would never have been environmental activists, or, anyway, they might only have been interested in a few birds, and they started their ARK just to invite more birds in. But as all the other creatures came back, then they walk out into their neighborhoods and they look at all these green spaces which we keep mowed for tidiness, and they see them as lost opportunities. And why are we doing that when we could be sharing it? Sorry, I talk a lot.
No, this is this is why we're here, Mary. Oh no, it's so true. Yeah, and I think it takes, and I can feel the impact as well when you've held a vision and you're deeply immersed with holding the heart vision of a different way on the earth, and for all of the creatures, it takes its toll on you, and there can be that the grief that comes along with that, right? And I think we're in that space right now, which we kind of spoke to earlier before coming on the call as well, that there is that sense of hope. There's hope, but there's hopelessness too, because we're losing and we've lost so much. And I think even in that, the grieving with the earth, because she is dying, or she has been dying. So to honor that, as well as to honor the newness that we hope to evoke and build upon, right, for the future.
It's just a cycle. Just a cycle.
Yeah.
And I was saying to you earlier, I was standing in the sea this morning and I was feeling hopeless, and I do this twice a day.
Yeah, of course. That's normal right now, Mary.
I know. But anyway, I was standing in the sea and I was looking at it and I was thinking, oh my God, there's nothing left in here. And I was thinking about how fishing was just destroying the place, and how when I was young there was forests of kelp, there was, I used to swim through all this life, and now there's nothing. It's just churned sand. And then suddenly, right beside me, this fish jumped out of the wave. Huge, big fish jumped out. And I looked at it in absolute shock and awe, and I realized, okay, there's still hope. And I think that was the message, was that there is still hope. Okay, don't give up. We can keep going, Oh
my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, because when you're tapped into the web of life, you're tapped into all of it, right? And so that when it shifts into the heaviness and into that place of, my God, will we ever be able to move through the eye of the needle with this? I think we will. I do. I really feel that we will. It's there's so much goodness coming beneath all the shite that is everything. So. Yeah, I think that faith, we have to have that faith moving forward, and in order to be good guardians, I suppose, with the nature realms as well. Exactly. I think if we give up, well, what chance have they? The bridge is not. Yeah, the bridge is destroyed. So. Yeah, oh, I love that, Mary. So we are the ARK. So people are. I've seen many, and I know on the land here, I'm only renting, but we have most of the land is gone wild as well here, and there's so much in it. It's just it gives so much back, and you can see the creatures love it, and they come and interact with you more, right, as well.
They do, yeah.
So that movement is something that people can participate through the website as well, and post up pictures. Is that right, of what they're doing?
We have a Facebook group where people they share their ARKs and the creatures that come to live there, in rooted and unrooted, and they share their signs. Everybody makes a sign if they can, to say this is an ARK, which kind of removes the kind of shame of having a messy garden,
right?
Because then make neighbors know what's going on. They don't just think, oh, you just are lazy or whatever. They realize that actually there's something important happening here. So it makes people feel proud. So this wonderful, the signs are wonderful, and they're popping up everywhere. People keep telling me they see them in strange places, and yeah. So it's that's the Facebook group. It's called We Are the ARK, and then I suppose it's social media driven, really. But it's like you don't have to, like, it's not like we're not making money out of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I am writing a book because nobody reads the website and it's wrecking my head. I thought if I wrote a book they'd read the book, so I am doing that. But otherwise, no, it's it's just for people to get some hope, and it's a really lovely community, and we kind of, in terms of the imagination process, I make sure there's no negative kind of stories or worries in this Facebook group. It's kind of a safe place where you can actually feel like, it's just we need somewhere where we're not driven, demented with all the bad stuff. If they can go onto my own Facebook page, I'll drive them demented with all the bad stuff. But no, not in the group. But yeah, that's just grand. Like, I mean, it's just spreading on its own, and people are telling other people about it. And now people will ask you, do you have an ARK or a garden? Like, it's starting to be a thing,
Yeah.
So, and I know the gardening industry is terrified, and I do realize that, like all industries, they're going to have to change everything. So, but they could easily adapt to become an ARK supporting industry as opposed to a garden supporting industry, and just need to have native plants and to stop with the chemicals, stop with digging the peat out of the earth. Just, it's so obvious. Stop importing plants. Like, just so easy, People are still using slug pellets, killing all the birds and hedgehogs and everything else that comes to eat the dead poisoned slugs, and it's just a lack of balance. And rather than rebalancing everything, we are using chemicals to adapt and poison everything. So
I know.
Yeah, but it'll all change. It's just we have to hold the vision that it will change, and
the awareness.
It's just a cycle, but I just want to be part of pushing that cycle back towards the light. Same as yourself.
Absolutely. And you are.
No.
And you are. So
unless it depends on the day. There's some days where I just whip up curses with my pot, and I just throw them at every politician I can think of.
Well, that's part of your magic as well, Mary. This is. I think that speaks to we've got. We're all things.
They're not real curses. I know. They're just in jest, but it just makes me feel better.
But sure, I know, like, there has to be the outlet for both. That's the thing, we can't live in this place of, and many do, in a utopian vision of what's possible, and then there's no acknowledgement of the shadow and of what's really going on. So we have to dig deep. We have to be able to go into the roots of stuff and explode them and heal them, really. So yeah.
Good to hear you say that, because some days I worry, am I just completely what's wrong with me? Why am I so dark and so bright and so dark and so bright? And you just wonder. You wonder some days.
And I think, Mary, like, being an Irish woman on this land of Ireland as well, that also holds so much weight of responsibility as well, of healing the earth, of the goddess herself, of all that's been hidden in the landscape, the elemental realm and human realm and all in between. So I think we feel that when we're connected in, and so there's a great weight of responsibility. So I am so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for being introduced to you, and I see the vision that you hold, and I stand alongside you with that vision, and from doing the small little things that I can do.
That's all we can do,
Yeah.
That's all we can do, and it's enough.
Exactly. Right. That's it. I think that's the key one, is that it is enough. Even whatever you do is enough, as long as it's conscious and it's with, the intention of heart behind it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Oh, well, I feel like that's a nice natural conclusion of our
Yeah.
chat, if you
Yeah.
feel.
Look,
But
thank you.
I'd love, there's so many other realms that I want to talk to you about, but I feel like today that's where we're at. Um, and so for you, Mary, like you're working in a new way with people, I know, helping them with ARK design on their own land, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I do now.
Okay. And so they can get in touch with you through your website.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Look forward. Thank you. That's just marymary.ie, which is
Perfect.
yeah. So that's it, and then I'm just writing and just dreaming mostly,
Yeah,
And things will
yeah,
get better more. It's
I
just
know.
it might get worse before it gets better.
Uh,
So
I think,
we'll be okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter anyway. None of it really matters. That's the thing. I just feel sorry for all the innocent creatures that we're not minding, and that's what we need to do, is to learn how to share again.
right,
So that's our job
right.
really, is while we're here, and we can manage all that. It'll be okay. So